Shall we begin?
I'll introduce you guys.
Goodness gracious.
Anyway, thanks everyone for coming today, and thanks for bearing with us on through these technical difficulties as we try and figure this out. But I'm excited to welcome you to the fourth in our series of talks by graduate students whose research explores environmental dilemmas. We've had 3 great talks so far, and I think you guys really enjoy what Dan and Ashley have to say. I want to keep this introduction really short because they're going to have really awesome things to talk about. But I just want to say I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come and be here and learn something new about sustainability and challenge sort of the way you think about our natural world. Graduate students at this university are doing work that's exploring dilemmas that we didn't think about, that many people wouldn't have thought about unless these graduate students were doing this amazing work. And so I think by being here, by staying curious and passionate about issues surrounding the environment, we're going to learn a lot, and we're just pushing forward what this university has to offer. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dan Reineman and Ashley Erickson. Dan is a lecturer in the School of Earth, Energy, and Environmental Resources.
Sciences.
Environmental Sciences, I apologize. Dan graduated with a PhD in the Emmett Interdisciplinary Program in Environment Resources at Stanford University. And Ashley Erickson is the Assistant Director for Law and Policy at the Center for Ocean Solutions.
Global Ocean Solutions.
Yeah, there you go. And so please join me in welcoming Dan and Ashley.
Once upon a time, we were graduate students. And then pretty recently, so we can just slide in. Thanks everybody for coming. We just wanted to start by acknowledging that, we are here. But as the title suggests, we're going to talk today about beaches and the coast. And I really like this angle, this view of the planet, because we call it Earth, but it's really more like water. This is the Pacific Ocean. This is the biggest thing on the surface of the Earth, and you could be in the Pacific Ocean and go halfway around the world and still be in the Pacific Ocean. So I think that's kind of amazing. But coasts, as we'll talk about, are really important because the people are all on the land. The coasts are what are in between the land and the ocean. So we'll talk a little more today about the coasts. So I'm Dan. I'm from San Diego, the coast.
I'm Ashley. I'm from North Carolina, also the coast.
So we're just curious, where's, show of hands, coastal states? Where? Scaling out.
North Carolina.
North
Yay!
Carolina.
Where? Chapel Hill. Oh, great. Yes, I went to law school at UNC Chapel Hill. Go North Carolina in some ways.
Where else? Where are you from?
California.
California, Los Angeles, Coastal County. Who else we got?
Florida.
Florida, all right, that's a coastal state.
Washington.
Washington.
I'm from one of only 2 states in the nation that have no rivers flowing into them, flowing only out of them.
This is good trivia. But I'll embarrass myself. You can just
It's
tell
beer
us.
pub. I'll tell you, it's Colorado.
Colorado. Awesome.
It's Continental Divide.
Yeah. All right, cool. So some people with some coastal background. Has anybody interacted with the ocean or coast, maybe just in the last week? Yeah, what'd you do? Anyone go to the beach, go for a swim? Oh yeah,
I was
you
in
went to the
Hawaii.
beach. Oh,
That's the other state.
Yeah.
Who else? Anybody get to the coast this week? Andy's got a hand up.
I was in Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz, hanging out at the beach.
I go to Santa Cruz every couple of weeks.
It's a good beach town. The rest of you probably interacted with the ocean also. Anybody eat some seafood? Yeah. How about breathe air? Right, something like half the air we breathe comes from phytoplankton that live in the ocean. How about walk on land? That will be most of us. Yeah, we have continents because we have oceans. And as you get into plate tectonics, the melting that happens as a result of there being oceans is what leads to the kind of crust that makes continents. So anyway, this is all just a long-winded way of saying that the ocean is really important.
Wait, what
it's
about
big. Oh.
some other things? Like, have you used your cell phone in the last 10 minutes?
Yeah.
We get a lot of really important things out of the deep sea bed that we use in cell phones and other electronics every day. 90% of everything in this room got to us via a container ship that went over the ocean from somewhere. So the ocean
furniture,
is,
the carpets,
yes,
chairs,
everything about your
clothes.
body, unless you really pay attention to Made in the USA, which is hard to do, right? So if you are paying attention, you'll realize that you look at the tag or you look at the bottom of the coffee cup, and most of it got here by container ship, big ships.
If you ate chicken, it might have been grown locally, but they shipped it to China to process it, and then they shipped it back. So that's just another. So anyway, the ocean's really important. And the coast, the chicken blowing your mind. Yeah. Just ruminate on that one.
Also really common for seafood. So local seafood caught, shipped far, far away, processed, canned, whatever, and then shipped back to the US for us to consume.
So all this by way of saying that even if you don't think of yourself as an ocean person, by virtue of living in a coastal state and doing everyday things like breathing, walking on land, eating food, and having stuff, you're interacting with the ocean, well, one way or another. So what we want to do today is we want you to come away with this with a few things. And I should say, by way of belated introduction, that this is unrehearsed. So we'll just be interrupting each other constantly as we proceed, and I apologize. Okay, so one thing we want you guys to do is come away from this hour we're spending together with understanding that coasts are important, and that they are complex. They are under threat in a variety of ways in which you might not suspect. So we're going to do some understanding. We want you to appreciate the social ecological systems approach. This is a way of thinking about environmental issues, and if we're trying to be more sustainable, this is a conceptual model for helping us do that as societies. So we want to appreciate that. We get some of the details. And lastly, we're going to reflect on the value of interdisciplinarity, and I'm really pleased to see the lineup of people that Andrew's put together for this seminar series, because you guys, what a great lineup of people doing really different kinds of things. And so the issues around sustainability, whether it's the coast, or was it last week? Was it the language that people use to really interesting issues? And if you only know one thing really well and you aren't able to communicate with people in other disciplines, you're going to be in trouble. So we want to do some understanding, some appreciating, and some reflecting. That's what. When you guys walk out here in an hour, you're going to be like, understanding and appreciation and reflection. That's the goal. So to do that, we're just going to quickly burn through just a broad overview of coastal issues, the good, the bad, and changing climate. We're going to take a deeper dive into beaches, just because when people think about sustainability, they're probably not thinking about the beach. And someone's got to think about the beach, so we're going to think about the beach today. And then we're gonna exercise our interdisciplinarity with an exercise, not like a physical exercise. And then we'll wrap up, and with any luck, there'll be time for like a half a question. More luck, maybe some proper discussion. That's the plan. Questions, comments, concerns before we embark? Right. So coasts, important, complex, and under threat. So coasts are important. We're going to focus a lot today on California, because that's where we are. It's also a place that Ashley and I happen to know a lot about. The coast in California is really important. It's about 1/5 of the land area. You don't need to write these numbers, but it's almost.
Unless you think they're fun and interesting,
And
which
yeah,
they are.
and the intersecting parties. like we do. 1/5 of the land area, but 2/3 to almost 3/4 of the people, the jobs, and the economy. So it's a small slice of land, but it is where society happens. And this isn't just true in California. If you look at the United States, these numbers pretty much track nationwide. About 1/5 of the land area, about 2/3 of all the people and economic activity. I don't have the figures in my brain for Earth, but the coasts are really important Earth-wide also. It's how we get to the ocean so we can move things around, feed ourselves. So coasts. This is California, the California coast. We're late 21 word for this thing. We're right here. 1 out of every 15 Americans live in one of these, as you point out, still won't work, lives in one of these 15 coastal counties. And that's a fun fact that you can write down. It's easy to remember as well. So the California coast is an important coast just in terms of what is happening in this country. Anything to add on that? Yeah, okay. Coasts, important. They're also really important because the coastal zone is the physical intersection between the terrestrial ecosystem and suite of ecosystems and the oceanic suite of ecosystems. So things that happen. Is there a stick? I might break the computer.
I can go.
No, you can just stay there. I'll wave my arms. Things that happen in the ocean affect things that happen on the land in the coast, and vice versa. So you can't get to the ocean without going over a coast and vice versa. So it's just as a physical place in between. Chock full of important species, chock full of important activities. This, by the way, this is the southern sea otter, very important in California. They play a really important role in coastal ecosystems, regulating sea urchins, which in turn regulate kelp, and if you want to have nice healthy kelp forests and world-class aquariums, you need sea otters in California. But other things happen in the coastal zone as well. So this is an oil rig in the Santa Barbara Channel. As a result of big-scale geologic processes happening over the last 150 million years, there's a lot of oil in near-shore, shallow coastal oceans, especially like the Gulf, but also up the coast of California. In fishing, this is Monterey. Something like $350 million commercial fishing industry in California, so that's not small potatoes. So fishing is really important. Some of you had your seafood this week. This is comes because people go out in the water and they fish for it. But recreation, we're getting closer to beaches. Recreation is a $14.7 billion coastal industry in California. This is ocean-dependent recreation. So having a hotel somewhere in LA County doesn't count. It has to be an ocean-dependent thing to go into that number. But so $14.7 billion coastal ocean tourism and recreation. That's your $350 million of commercial fishing. So just to give you some sense in this state of the importance of things like waves and beaches and coastal towns like Huntington Beach, Surf City, USA, or San Diego, or even San Francisco, if you're in a coastal town.
That was the difference between the billions and the millions. It's
Yeah,
just sounds-
that orders of magnitude. I don't enunciate very well. So recreation, we'll come back to this. We're going to talk more about beaches. These are also really, really complex systems. So we talked about like all those different activities that are happening. We talked about some of the things that are happening in the ecosystem. We talked about how many people live in them. And so just as an example of this complexity, this is Drake's Bay, Drake's Estero up in Point Reyes. So it's this really important coastal estuary. Coastal estuaries are important for fish. Something like 1/4 of all ocean fish in California spend some part of their life cycle in estuaries. So without estuaries, there's no fish. So they're this complex connection between what's happening on the coast, what's happening in the ocean, the life cycle. You can't really see, but these are seals pulled out on the beach, which is where they raise their babies. This is also a complex system in that it is surrounded by ag land. So there's a lot of complexity just in the ecosystem. But there's also a lot of social complexity. So one of the things that was happening in Drake's Bay was aquaculture. They were growing oysters in Drake's Bay. And Drake's Bay is part of Point Reyes National Seashore, so it's run by the Department of the Interior, and there was a lease for the oyster farm, and then the lease expired, and so there were lawsuits, and people wanted to keep their oysters, and everybody went crazy. And neighbors were angry at neighbors, and groups were coming out, and it was the farmers versus the not farmers versus the foodies in San Francisco. So this is socially complex also. Right? So it's not just a complex ecosystem, it's a complex social system. It's all tied into this place. And this isn't just true in Drake's Bay, it's also true in pretty much all of the California coast. As a side note, this is a Stanford coastal science law and policy class on a field trip out here last spring. A class you too can take one day. Okay. Coasts are under threat. What, we want to blow through these?
Sure.
Under
So,
threat? Yeah.
so we thought we'd take
Sad
a
part.
moment to just get a little sad, but you know, we'll turn it around. Don't worry. And Dan's talked a lot about the coastal system, and we're going to be focused on beaches, but it's important to also think about the threats that are facing the ocean and the coast, and that land-sea boundary that Dan's been talking about in terms of what's an ocean-based threat versus a land-based threat. And also, I call the great multiplier climate change in all of its basket of threats. And so just in terms of view ocean-based threats, these are pictures of what we call bycatch, which results mostly from fishing, sometimes active fishing, sometimes passive or ghost fishing, where fishing gear has actually been detached from the boat and it's out in the water kind of floating around on its own, but still fishing. And fishing for the wrong things, in this case, sea turtles and seabirds. Overfishing is another key threat that's related to both of these series of photographs. On the bottom here, this is a good ghost fishing example. Clearly lots of different nets entwined in each other that have managed to also entwine this seal. Or is it sea lion? You're the marine biologist.
Sea lion, I can't really see your flash, it must be a seal.
And then in the top pictures, we bucket this into the threat of marine debris, essentially mostly plastic, in the ocean. We just passed our bag ban, our statewide bag ban here in California.
That's one good thing that happened in the
Yeah. There were a couple shining moments. On the left here, these birds and other animals actually think that some of this trash floating out in the ocean is actually food, and so they're eating it up like it's delicious, and then actually passing away because they're not digesting it.
There was a report on the news for the NPR listeners just tonight, and they've wondered why it is that seabirds eat floating plastic. And they just said, well, it must look like food, but it turns out it's not because it looks like food, it's because it smells like food. When things float around in the ocean, little bits of algae grow on them, and then they smell like the food, and that's what happened.
One more example happening out at sea, and this is pretty self-explanatory, but Dan showed you that oil rig. I guess that was off the coast of Santa Barbara. You know, it's not all fun and games with those. Things can go really wrong and have huge impacts on the ecological system, also the economic system in terms of the social ecological system. Getting back to the beach, these are examples of how we're altering our coastal habitats so that land-sea boundary between land-based activity and what's happening out in the ocean in our estuaries. On the top is example of aquaculture farm. I can't actually remember where I yanked this photograph from, but I would presume Southeast Asia, and I would also presume shrimp. So this is just a public service announcement. If you're a shrimp lover, pay attention to where your shrimp is coming from. Unfortunately, much of our shrimp is coming from Southeast Asia, where we are basically wholesale plowing through coastal mangroves and creating these shrimp aquaculture farms right on the coast. And shrimp are filter feeders, and so they are detritivores. Is that better? I'm a lawyer, you know, you try to throw in some terms here and there. But it gets to the point where they can't filter enough, it gets so polluted, they're so concentrated, they just basically move on to the next mangrove, tear that down, create an aquaculture, move on. So it's really bad habitat destruction, which is, you know, eliminating all the ecosystem services that come from healthy coastal ecosystems like mangroves. Their storm protection, their habitat and nursery ground for little larvae and little fishes. They do all kinds of really good things in and of themselves, besides just be beautiful. And so thinking about the destruction that might be happening in terms of just coastal habitat and how we're altering those. On the bottom, this is a picture from Monterey Bay. It's a development called the Ocean Harbor House. And this is a seawall that they have permitted by the California Coastal Commission. Does this look natural? It was meant to be. It's meant to look like a dune. It's trying. But
You see natural dunes in the back.
yeah, you can see some natural dunes back there. But what's going on here is a combination of a lot of things. Coastal development too close to the ocean is basically stopping the beach's ability to retreat naturally with storm surge and other natural, you know, ocean tides and such, but also compounding that with sea level rise. We're seeing an even tighter squeeze between this coastal development on the dune and the ocean actually trying to work its way inland a little bit. I mentioned the great multiplier, and I just talked about it a little bit with sea level rise in that bottom photo. But we've got a lot going on in terms of the impacts that we're seeing as a result of global climate change. And these are just some really wild and crazy pictures. Coastal erosion down the left. We've got a really awesome, where'd you pull this from? In the middle on the top?
San Francisco with the Bay Bridge, probably the King Tide project.
Yeah, King Tides, okay. And again, more development and this squeeze between what's happening and the ocean moving inward, and the development doesn't move backwards as it comes in. And then ocean acidification, this picture on the bottom right, basically the ocean's ability to take up CO2 emissions is fundamentally changing the ocean's chemistry, which is causing it to be actually more acidic. So we all remember acid rain. We're actually seeing acidic properties in our ocean, and it's really affecting those species that are calcifiers, that are forming shells. It's impacting their ability at even the larval stage to start growing their shells. We're seeing ocean acidification in particularly very prominent already on the west coast of the US, and so we're kind of seeing it here first. We're learning a lot. That was a lot of doom and gloom. I'm happy to say that for every example, I've just given you all these awful pictures, every single one has a host of solutions that are coupled with it. You know, we know these things are happening and we're working on ways to solve them. And Dan and I are going to talk a little bit today just about this coastal squeeze and the beach and what's happening along the beach and the confluence of people in the ocean. But the kind of themes of the social ecological system that we're going to be talking about apply across all of these threats. And if any one of them is interesting to you guys, please do let us know. We can talk more in detail later afterwards. So enough doom and gloom, I think. Is the doom and gloom over?
What about the beach? So we'll just...
This is a beautiful beach.
Beautiful beach, no beach. So we'll just talk for a couple seconds about just a little bit of background specifically on beaches and some of the things that, as part of this coastal system, some things that they are good for and not good for, and you know, some local pictures. This is Ocean Beach. People don't think of San Francisco as a beach town, but 7 miles of beautiful white sand right there in San Francisco. You should go. Beaches, you might just think of plain empty sand, but they're actually really important components of the coastal ecosystem, even empty looking sandy beaches. There are tons of small critters like mole crabs and diatoms and grunion that require beach habitat. Also larger, more charismatic things like elephant seals. If you're into birds, some people are really into birds. Birds are really important. The Pacific Coast Flyway is where thousands and thousands of birds across dozens and dozens of species go up and down the west coast. Their winter migration every year, so they spend lots of time on beaches. We'll talk about that. But white sandy beaches, there's also our rocky intertidal zones, which are home to all kinds of really interesting, important marine life. This is Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, just over the hill in San Mateo County, kind of from Half Moon Bay towards Montara. It's a really awesome place. You go to tide pooling, you should go and check it out. When we're talking about all the kinds of organisms that are maybe commercially important, like fish, the role of these rocky intertidal habitats is really important for this ecosystem. And so it's not just the importance for the ecosystem, it's also important for us as a coastal state that has a really large and well-developed tourism and recreation economy. So this is Huntington Beach. This is Surfers in the Water, Huntington Beach. So beach ecosystems provide lots of ecosystem services, many of which are really important economically and culturally in lots of places, including California. But all of this use, this proximity to the crowded coast comes with some costs. So the marine debris that is an issue in the ocean is also an issue when it washes ashore.
Genesis starts on shore, for the most part.
Yeah, that's true. There aren't a lot of cars in the ocean, the general rule. So going back to Ashley's point about the coastal squeeze, this is a neat picture. This is so here's the coastline. So this is land, and then this is ocean. So this is topography. Anyone know, y'all know what you call the topography underwater?
Like
Bathymetry. You
Yeah.
nailed it. Yeah, so topography and bathymetry. And what you see is that off the coastline, you see a bunch of really flat, shallow ocean. This is the continental shelf. And what's interesting about this is that 20,000 years ago, when tons of Earth's water was caught up in miles thick glacial ice, sea level was about 135 to 140 meters lower than it is today. So here's San Francisco, here's the Golden Gate Bridge. There's the Farallon Islands out here. So you could have walked to the Farallon Islands, and you would have had to go something like 30 miles due west from San Francisco to get to the beach. I wasn't there. Presumably there were beaches. So the glaciers melted, Flandrian transgression, Holocene, the geologist in the room, Holocene. Sea level came up 135 meters to its present level. What happened to the beaches? They moved, right? How do we know they moved?
Because they're not where they used to be.
Because we have them, right? If they hadn't moved, they would be 135 meters underwater. So all that is by way of saying that if sea level is going to come up meters and meters, and we don't let the beach move, what's going to happen to the beach? Where is the beach in this picture?
It's going to be submerged.
It's going to be submerged. The beach is going to drown. So this brings us now full circle to this question of sustainability of beaches, and what are we going to do on the coast as a society to make sure that beaches, these important ecosystems that provide all these ecosystem services that are important, are also nice places to go. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about sustainability of beaches? So we are going to think about this problem as a group. I know it's late. Some of you are getting tired. You just had dinner.
But none of you are pregnant, and I am, and I'm still awake. You can do it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a case of where this exact question of what are we going to do with these vanishing beaches is being litigated as we speak. So we're passing around, we don't pass it, don't just pretend it's not sitting in front of you. So what we want to do is we want to think about the beach as a coupled social ecological system. In other words, we want to think about what's happening in the ecosystem, we want to think about what's happening in the social system, and we're just going to basically brainstorm what's going on here. And it's going to help us appreciate how complex this problem is, what are the pros and cons of different kinds of solutions, who wins, who loses, and it will help us understand why the coupled social ecological system framework is sort of a way to help organize this crazy complexity. So what we're going to do now, we can pass it around, is we're going to read this, just take about 5 minutes, it's about a 500-word article, just pass that, I'll just kind of pass this around. There are more copies than people. It's just a classic from the canon of modern journalism. Dustin Hoffman, Ray Romano, and Pierce Brosnan all hope to restore this prized but battered Malibu beach. So this is Los Angeles International Airport. This is Los Angeles County. This is Malibu. Anyone seen The Big Lebowski?
Yeah.
Stay out of Malibu, Lebowski. This is what he's talking about, Malibu. It's just a narrow little strip of town. And Broad Beach is a beach up here where a lot of rich Hollywood type people live. So take a minute, read this start to finish. Anybody need another minute? Take it. Just look up when you're done. All right, everybody get through that? We cut some of it, so there were some ellipses in there to move things along. But you get the gist of it. So, what's the issue in Malibu?
Too many people.
That's oh my
Fair
goodness.
enough.
Trust me.
Yeah, I'll work on this.
Yeah, so too many people is a problem. It's actually not such a problem in Malibu because the property values are so high. But like, what's the problem that these rich Hollywood A-list types are?
People too close to the beach.
So we got too close to the beach. So what is the specific problem that these homeowners?
The property and their view are going away if their properties collapse into the water.
The properties are collapsing into the water. So the problem is that is that the beach is eroded, and now the ocean is threatening their homes, right? So beach is nice and legible. So beach erosion, that's our problem. What do they propose? What is the proposed solution? What do they want to do? Yeah, what do they want to build? They want to build a giant artificial sand dune, right? So we'll call this is called coastal armoring. In this case, they're not building a seawall like we saw in Monterey in the pictures Ashley showed, but they're going to build a huge freaking pile of sand. Huge pile. Can you guys see this from down here? Because we're all mobile. We could just roll this way. This is where the rest of the action's going to happen.
Do you want to use a black pen?
Let's see, my red pen is pointless.
Yeah.
We have a black pen.
Might be hard to pick up an camera.
So the problem is erosion. The solution they're proposing is armoring. So what is the ecosystem that we're talking about? What ecosystem are we working in here? The coastal ecosystem. Let's be more specific. This is not a trick question. It's the beach, right? So the beach. What kind of beach is it? Or was it? This is a sandy beach. So a sandy beach, so there's our ecosystem. The black is much better. And what's the social system? Like, think about the social setting. Like, who are the players that are right there on this sandy beach? Yes, it's some homeowners. We'll just call them homeowners. Dispense with their
These
holiday.
just happen to be very famous and rich.
You can spend millions of dollars to truck how much sand around? Lots of sand. But we can kind of zoom out a little bit. So here's the sandy beach. We just think about sort of the coastal ecosystem. We zoom out a little bit. We showed you the map. Talking about maybe like a slightly larger version of the ecosystem around the sandy beach. This isn't a trick question. We just haven't taught you the answer yet. So, yeah, the coastal chaparral on the terrestrial side, that's good. But one good way to think about it, that's totally accurate down there. It's called the littoral cell, and it's sort of the area of the coastline where that's sort of a contained unit in terms of how the sand and currents and water move around. So when I think about the littoral cell, it's kind of slightly one bigger scale. What's the bigger scale around the homeowners? Sure, or maybe just like the city of Malibu, right? Like they talk about the permits, they talk about like local government a little bit. So sort of city of Malibu, where Jeff Lebowski is not allowed to do. Then what's the bigger, some bigger organizational social units around?
The county?
Yeah, the county of Los Angeles, LA. I'm a bad writer, sorry. What's maybe the next one bigger than that? State of California. Okay, so the social setting of the homeowners are kind of embedded in this larger system. What about in the littoral cell? Outside of what's kind of the next bigger thing? Anyone looked at a map of California?
Is the answer California?
Sort of. Ooh, that was bad.
Interesting.
So that's an accurate scale map of California. We are here. This is Point Conception. Malibu is like here. Santa Barbara, LA. Nice, actually pretty good. The Channel Islands right here. This is called the Southern California Bight, and it is an oceanographically distinct sort of province in terms of the connection between the transverse ranges, the Southern California mountains, the Central Coast Mountains, and then what happens with this current when it swoops back up here. So the next biggest thing, I didn't expect y'all to know this, it's cool. SoCal Bight. And it's Bight spelled with a GHT. I did have to look that up. I couldn't remember. And then maybe the next biggest thing would be the California Current Large Marine Ecosystem. So the LME. So that's sort of the big California current that runs down the coast. We're not going to get into the oceanography. It's really neat, but kind of oceanographically, what's happening off the coast of California is sort of similar to what's happening off the coast of Oregon, Washington, a little bit of British Columbia, and northern Baja, Oregon. So we could embed, so there's kind of our next, so even the ecosystem of what's happening on this beach is embedded within these sort of larger versions of ecosystems. Okay, so now we know where we are, what's happening. So what I want you guys to do now, we're going to break you up into 3 groups. So if kind of Elizabeth from here on down, you guys can just roll together in wheelie chairs. In LA County over to Colorado, if you guys kind of group together over there, and then kind of rest everybody down here, just kind of ooze together in your rolly chairs. So we're going to have 3 groups. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3. And what we want you to do is just take a moment. Group 1 has question 1, Group 2 has question 2, and so on. And talk about these questions. So Group 1, what are the social benefits and impacts of the problem that's happening here? Oh no, Group 1, social. The problem that's happening here, what they're proposing, who are the players, think about the different scales that they're playing at. There's a lot, this article, the answers are all in this article, and then kind of things you can brainstorm. So what's happening socially in this system? Group 2, what's happening ecologically? What are some of the things? They don't talk about ecosystems so much in that article, but we showed you some slides. You can use your constrained imagination and your clever brains to come up with some of the things that are probably happening ecologically in this system. And then Group 3, the article talks about a bunch of things that have to do with how we're making governance choices about this coastal system. There's a bunch of different agencies that get mentioned, some different processes. So what you guys to do is just take a moment to review this article and think about some of the governance challenges that are mentioned in it, and some of the tools that are kind of addressed to deal with this problem that we highlighted. That sound good? So we're going to take like 5 or 8 minutes and just review the article, think about your question, and talk about it with your group. Sound good? Already know you guys know what you're doing?
I'm just gonna say it's 8:20. So if you're in the class and you have to leave at 8:20, that's totally fine. But if not, then let's hang out and work on this.
It's gonna be fun. Okay, go to work. Thank you. Give me about 5 to 8 minutes. We'll make this quicker.
So unless you're like going over my head, I'm not seeing.
Being inclusive.
Well, potentially like, so there are ecosystems that depend on like shellfish / beaches, right? And so like, if that's being threatened and you're like restoring that, then it might preserve the ecosystem. You know what I mean?
It does say how it's yeah, it's like someone in the article
like the construction process of whatever it is, and like what happens in that new time if those species survive that process. And it's, I guess, species that depended on that like shallow water ecosystem if they over that or kind of died off. I don't know, like the replenishment process. This part of the beach
Because it's
Because like they can move all like everyone's houses like to I don't know 10 steps back, then they'd probably be okay with that. But if they want to move their house, they have to move their house to the back of whatever water, like whatever zone it is. They want to preserve like how good their property is.
But like they can afford to move, but they can also afford to.
That's the thing. If they were poor, she's like just move.
I think like another impact is like what about where they're I don't know exactly where they're getting this like sand from, but it's from inland. So like that could be, I mean it's just destroying some natural formation inland, and so you're like destroying something, putting it somewhere else, and potentially destroying that. One thing, there's a line in this, like they're trying to restore nature, right? Like the coast. It says nature is going to keep trying to take it away, like take this away. Like nature is the problem. It's also the thing you're trying to say.
Yeah. Is there presently
Weird thing
public
to say.
access?
That's a great question, sort of.
But they're claiming.
But pretend that they should the title could be limited to go
They're
away.
restoring a beach, like
It's a
trying
good
to say
thing to
that
think about in broad terms.
I wondered how other neighboring, and I don't think that would be affected, because wouldn't this be higher theoretically than everywhere else, and would that be like?
Actually,
They're building a rock wall to like support like those artificial things.
In terms of like a benefit, is the coastal erosion threatening the houses, then like the community might have to relocate if they don't do something about it. So a benefit would be, at least for that community, that they still stay in their same spot and not have to.
Not only that, they're actually kind of like, they're not working to preserve any of the ecological, like any of the environment there. They just like want us to keep the water out. So whatever they're gonna build doesn't necessarily become a ecosystem. It just becomes like a barrier.
Yeah, I think it's about official content.
I guess just like the way I was saying it, it's just a wall.
That's what this is actually concrete, like,
So it seems like there's like an environmental and a social cost for transporting the sand. and, like,
Bring it back, take another minute and a half.
So if those animals can't live there,
Yeah.
crazy wall. It's just interesting.
maybe this, they're gonna
I
die.
was gonna die. You're gonna go to some of the beaches.
Maybe they raise that.
Right.
It's hard to say, but it's not gonna be the same probably. And
So, like,
they're just disrupting
Imagine
it.
it had been like a community that was like a much lower socioeconomic
Yeah.
status than evacuated there. Like how differently it would have been.
Right. Yeah.
It's encroaching.
Alright, it's great listening to you guys talk about this, but because we're short on time, we're gonna abbreviate the discussion. So, social benefits and impact. What are some of the social benefits and impacts that you guys talked about?
So one thing we talked about primarily was like how much beach access the public had, 'cause like say theoretically they had at least some limited access to begin with before the plan. It sounds like the plan will make it much more restricted to who can actually enjoy the benefits of the beach.
So they might actually see beach access go away. So that's a really interesting question, like they have beach access, but whose beach access is it? Like, where does it say that they are allowed to have access to how much beach? So, great point. What else?
We're also talking about the benefits of the project being that the community that is there won't have to move, like,
So-
at least like near term.
In other words, their private property gets to remain their private property. That's a benefit. It's their land. They own it. They have title to it. Other social impacts that you could think of?
We talked about the quarry and like how people who live where the sand is being mined, besides the environmental impact of getting the sand, there might be a social impact of like noise pollution.
How many trucks is it gonna take to fill out? I actually did the number, ran the numbers one time. It's a lot of truckloads of sand. I don't even know where to put that on here, but lots of trucks. All right, on the ecosystem side, some impacts, some benefits.
Okay, so do humans count as like, I don't know, like the fact that the humans don't have to move?
Yeah, sure. There's the, go back to the private property. They don't need to move. That's a benefit of the project. They get to stay in their homes. What are some other benefits of the project ecologically that they're calling benefits?
it's semi-preserving a beach zone.
Yeah, it's gonna make some beach, so they're gonna make beach. That's good. What else?
Or impacts.
It was kind of unclear to us whether or not it would actually save any, like, marine beach life.
Yeah, right? Like, what about, what's gonna be under their sand dune? Mentioned in the revetment, you know what a revetment is? It's a giant flipping pile of rocks. So there is gonna be this impact of this pile of rocks. What are some things, thinking ecologically, zoom out a little bit, scale-wise, what is an impact, a threat to the coastal system that we talked about earlier that is gonna be troublesome? It's been rising for quite some time, and it is going to continue to rise.
The ocean.
Yeah, so sea level. So sea level is rising. What might happen to this beach that gets made? It might go away. Going back to the social side, say they create this great big beach with this huge sand dune. Who gets to go on it? Is that clear? Whose beach is it going to be once it gets made? So this question of who owns the beach is plays really interesting into how it makes decisions about how to manage it. So governance tools and challenges side, who are some of the players in this? What are some of the tools that are mentioned?
So it's kind of like privately instigated, so the homeowners can.
Yeah, so that like a tool, it's a small group of homeowners and they have lots of money. So you think about money is.
It seems like a low-risk investment for the government, so.
Because they don't need any, yeah, so that's a challenge to
Fundraise, they
overcome.
don't need to sell bonds, they don't need to go through all of that legislative
Yeah.
process.
Who are some of the other players that are dealing with this? Some of the groups and organizations that got mentioned.
There's the coastal
The
commission.
Coastal Commission, so the Coastal Commission, Coastal that is the state agency in California whose job it is to issue permits to do things like pile up rocks. So, and maybe we'll just kind of truncate that point there.
California Coastal Commission is not a subset of EPA, correct?
Correct.
It
It
is
is
its
its
own
own
Californian.
independent California state agency.
You do the Department of Land and Natural Resources here in California.
It's just one of many, many, many environmental related commissions in the state of California. So what you see is, in this case, the homeowners are trying to get a permit from the Coastal Commission to make changes on their beach. And so the way to think about this is that in this social ecological system, you've got all the different scales, everything that's happening on the social side. You've got the homeowners interacting with, this is, I made it right in there, there's California, the state of California, the rules that they have to follow when getting their permits are dictated by the city of Malibu. LA County may play into this if there's unincorporated county land nearby. And they're trying to make changes at their scale of their local beach, but sea level rise is an impact that is happening at a global scale. What's going to happen to the sand as sea level rises? It's probably going to move around the littoral cell. So we have beach down current is going to get bigger. So this complexity here. So what you see between the social side of this system and the ecological side of the system, you see these links from the homeowners making a beach. You see sea level rise, a global ecological phenomenon affecting how that beach maybe changes the littoral cell here, and then this sand is going to make some other beach further down in Malibu exciting. And there are different agencies. In this case, the Coastal Commission is in charge of mediating some of this complexity. But they've got to build this giant pile of rocks and these artificial dunes. They've got to build it on state land. So whose job, this isn't even mentioned in the article, but a different state agency entirely, the State Lands Commission. So a whole other agency whose job it is to decide whether or not the homeowners can have this land to build on. They're going to need permit approval from the city of Malibu. They're going to need permit approval from the Coastal Commission. They're going to need land granting authority from the State Lands Commission. So you see that things get really crazy. But if we constrain ourselves to just thinking about the flows of benefits and impacts between different parts of this system and the way that we manage kind of falling in between the sort of the force that mediates some of those impacts. So this is where the action is. This is where the science that you guys are going to go and do fits in. So in between sort of the complexity of the ecological side and the social side, you have these tools and institutions for managing both the people and the nature, for tying those things together. So this is the coupled social ecological system, and it's not just a series of circles, it is all of these crazy arrows going back and forth in between. So that's kind of what we wanted to take away from that. And from there, as time dwindles, you guys are so patient and alert, pour it out, it's complex. So if we want to manage beaches to stick around for a long time, what do we need to know about? Well, we have to understand what's happening on them ecologically, but we also have to understand who are the players socially, and we have to understand these things in the middle that manage the interplay between those systems. So the SES mindset, and you can't just do that if you're a one discipline kind of person. So I'm a marine biologist, but then I worked in Washington, D.C., and I did a disciplinary PhD. Ashley is a lawyer who now works with scientists, and so if you want to kind of work in this space and make these connections toward actually achieve some sustainable solutions, you have to be fluent on both sides of this complex system, and that doesn't just happen. So we'll just, if you guys want to talk, we can talk about later. So we hope that after all that, you've a little bit of understanding now that coasts are important, that they're complex, and that they're in trouble unless we do things differently and better. We hope that you can appreciate a little better that if you want to sustainably manage this really complex system, it helps to have a framework to organize these different parts and think about how they connect. And then we didn't really have much time for reflection. But maybe when you leave tonight, when you're like lying in bed, you can be like, interdisciplinary, it's great. And if you have any follow-up questions, comments, concerns, if we offended you in any way, this is how you can find us. Thank you for your attention. And we can stick around and chat about this as long as anyone wants to stick around and chat about this. And if you all go bombing out of the room, that's cool too. So, thanks.